The gleaming Valorian starship emerged from hyperspace, its silver hull reflecting the distant light of Earth's sun. On the command bridge, Captain Lisa stood tall, her 7-foot frame imposing even among her own kind. Her violet eyes narrowed as she studied the small blue planet on the main view screen. "So this is the primitive world we've been ordered to contact," she said, her voice rich with disdain. "Look at their pathetic satellites. Their technology is barely past the Stone Age by our standards." Her second-in-command, Mira, stepped beside her. "Our scans show they have 2 primary sexes like us, but their society lacks proper structure. Their males appear to hold equal or greater status than females in many regions." Lisa laughed, the sound echoing across the bridge. "How absurd. No wonder they've advanced so slowly. Any society that allows their weaker sex such prominence is doomed to inefficiency." The Valorians had evolved with clear sexual dimorphism. Females towered over males, possessed greater physical strength, and dominated all aspects of their civilization. For thousands of years, they had refined this natural order, with males serving supportive roles while females led, fought, and governed. "Prepare the contact team," Lisa ordered, "and send our demands to their planetary leaders." Within hours, the news of alien arrival spread across Earth. The Valorian ship hovered above the United Nations headquarters in New York, its massive shadow casting a chill among the gathered crowds despite the summer heat. Inside the UN General Assembly, world leaders debated their response. The Valorians had requested, or rather, demanded, a diplomatic meeting to establish formal relations. "We need to send our best and brightest," said the Secretary General. "Scientists, diplomats, and military personnel who can represent humanity's interests." In a military base not far from the city, Colonel Tom received his orders. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and a decorated military career, he had been selected to join Earth's first contact team. As he packed his gear, his commanding officer briefed him on what little they knew about the aliens. "They call themselves Valorians. Advanced technology, hierarchical society. They seem particularly interested in our social structures. Be careful, Tom. We're sending you in blind." 3 days later, Tom stood with 11 other humans in a reception chamber aboard the Valorian ship. The room was uncomfortably warm, the gravity slightly stronger than Earth's. He noticed the delegation included 6 men and 6 women, a balanced representation that seemed to amuse their hosts. The doors slid open, and Captain Lisa entered with her officers. The humans immediately noticed the aliens' unusual composition. All the leadership positions were held by tall, muscular females. The few males present stood behind them, smaller in stature and dressed in service uniforms. "Welcome aboard," Lisa said through a translation device. "I am Captain Lisa of the Valorian Exploration Fleet. We have studied your transmissions and find your world interesting, if primitive." Her gaze moved across the human delegation, lingering on the men with undisguised mockery. When she reached Tom, she paused. "You send your males to represent you in first contact. How curious." She circled him slowly. "This one appears less fragile than most. What is your function, Earth male?" Tom stood straight, meeting her eyes despite having to look up. "Colonel Tom, United States Space Force. Military advisor to our diplomatic team." Lisa's laughter rang through the chamber, joined by her female officers. "A warrior? How charming." On Valoria, males lacked the physical and mental fortitude for combat. The human delegation shifted uncomfortably, but Tom remained composed. "Different worlds, different ways, Captain. We look forward to learning about each other's societies." "Indeed," Lisa replied, her smile never reaching her eyes. "You'll find our ways vastly superior to your chaotic system. Perhaps your species can evolve properly with our guidance." As the formal introductions continued, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that the Valorians had more in mind than simple diplomatic relations. Their dismissive attitude toward human males seemed more than cultural curiosity. It felt like they were evaluating them for some unknown purpose. What none of the humans could know was that beneath her contemptuous exterior, Captain Lisa was already sending specialized scans of the male humans to the Valorian homeworld, where scientists awaited the data with desperate anticipation. 6 months after first contact, the cultural exchange program between Earth and Valoria began. The Valorian High Council had selected 50 humans to visit their homeworld, supposedly to learn about their advanced civilization. Tom was surprised to find himself among those chosen, especially after the mockery he'd faced during the initial meetings. "They specifically requested you," his commander explained, looking equally confused. "Something about wanting to study our military structure. Be on your guard, Tom. We still don't know their true intentions." The journey to Valoria took 3 weeks aboard the alien vessel. During transit, the humans were kept separate from most of the crew, interacting only with designated cultural liaisons. These liaisons were exclusively female, reinforcing what they had already observed about Valorian society. When they finally arrived, the humans gazed in awe at the Valorian capital. Gleaming spires of crystal and metal reached toward the pink-hued sky, with aircraft weaving between buildings in perfect coordination. Everything appeared flawlessly organized, efficient, and clean. "Impressive, isn't it?" a voice said behind Tom. He turned to find a tall Valorian female watching him. Unlike Captain Lisa's military uniform, she wore flowing robes with intricate patterns that seemed to shift colors in the light. "Very," Tom admitted. "I'm Colonel." "Tom. Yes, I know who you are." She smiled, but like all Valorian smiles he'd seen, it contained a hint of superiority. "I am Aria, advisor to the Queen. I've been assigned as your personal guide during your stay." Tom noticed something different about Aria compared to the other Valorians he'd met. Though she still regarded him with the same cultural disdain, there was a curiosity in her eyes that seemed genuine. "You must be important," Tom said. "Why would a Queen's advisor be assigned to a primitive Earth male?" Aria's smile tightened at his sarcasm. "Perhaps to understand how your kind has managed to survive this long with such inefficient social structures." Over the next few weeks, Aria showed Tom the wonders of Valorian civilization. He observed their council meetings, visited their military academies, and toured their scientific facilities. Everywhere they went, he noticed the same pattern: females in positions of authority, males in supportive roles. One evening, as they walked through a public garden, Tom finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "Where are all the children? I haven't seen any since arriving." Aria paused, her usually composed face showing a flash of something Tom couldn't identify. "Reproduction is complex for our species. We have strict controls on population." "That doesn't answer my question." She sighed. "If you must know, birth rates have been declining for the past 3 centuries. Children are rare and precious. They are raised in special centers, not in public spaces." As their conversations continued over the following days, Tom pieced together more of the puzzle. Valorian males were not just politically subordinate, they were genetically engineered to be compliant. Thousands of years of selective breeding had created a society where females controlled every aspect of reproduction. "Your males seem to have much more variation," Aria said one day, studying Tom with those analytical eyes. "It's inefficient. It's natural," Tom countered. "Diversity is strength, not weakness." Later that month, Tom was invited to observe a medical facility. There, he noticed something odd: hundreds of Valorian females undergoing treatments in specialized chambers, but very few successfully emerging with signs of pregnancy. When he mentioned this to Aria, her composure cracked momentarily. "Our genetic pool has become too refined," she admitted after a long silence. "Each generation, fewer females can successfully conceive. Even with our technology, compatibility becomes more difficult to achieve." That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He reviewed everything he'd seen and heard since arriving. The Valorians' interest in humans, their specific focus on human males, the declining birth rates. Something bigger was happening beneath the surface of this cultural exchange. What Tom didn't know was that in a secure laboratory beneath the royal palace, Valorian scientists were already testing human genetic samples against their own and finding results that would shock their entire civilization. Tom began noticing subtle changes in how the Valorians treated him. The dismissive glances had transformed into curious stares. Scientists he encountered would quickly look away when he caught them watching him. Even Aria's attitude had shifted, her mockery now mixed with genuine interest in his responses. 3 months into his stay, Tom gained access to the great library of Valoria. While browsing historical records, he discovered something the Valorians hadn't shared. Their species had once been much more diverse. Ancient images showed Valorian males of varying heights and builds, not the uniform, smaller stature they all possessed now. Finding our history interesting, Aria appeared beside him, making him jump. "Your males weren't always like this," Tom said, pointing to the images. "What happened?" Aria hesitated before sitting beside him. 10,000 years ago, we began selective breeding programs. Each generation, we refined our genetic lines. Females became stronger, smarter, more capable. Males became docile, Tom finished. "But you didn't count on the consequences." "What consequences could there be from perfection?" she asked, but her voice lacked conviction. That evening, Aria invited Tom to a private dinner in her quarters, an unprecedented honor for an Earth visitor. The room was elegant but practical, with strange plants providing soft illumination. Tom noticed a wall of scientific texts and stepped closer to examine them. "Genetic compatibility in cross-species reproduction," he read aloud. Unusual reading material for a political advisor. Aria set down her drink. "Before I joined the Queen's Council, I was a senior genetic researcher. And now you're babysitting an Earth male. Quite the career change." She didn't smile. "I requested you specifically, Tom." The revelation hung in the air between them. Tom considered his next words carefully. "Why?" "Our species is dying," she said simply. "Despite our technological advancement, despite our social perfection, we face extinction within 5 generations." Tom sat down across from her. "The declining birth rates. It's worse than that. Each generation, fewer viable pregnancies reach term. Our genetic pool has become too uniform. We engineered out the very diversity that allowed adaptation." She leaned forward. "When we discovered Earth, we were amazed by your species' genetic variety. So inefficient, so random, yet so viable." Tom's mind raced. "You think human DNA might be compatible with Valorian? Our preliminary tests show possibilities." Aria's usually confident voice wavered. "Your species is remarkably adaptable at the genetic level. We've never encountered anything like it." Over the following weeks, Tom was invited to observe more research facilities. Under the guise of cultural exchange, he was shown laboratories where Valorian scientists studied human cellular samples. They never explicitly stated their purpose, but Tom understood. They were testing for reproductive compatibility. During a demonstration of Valorian medical technology, a scientist named Mara approached him. "Your cellular regeneration rate is fascinating," she said, scanning his hand with a device. "So different from ours." "Different good or different bad?" Tom asked. "Different. Promising," she replied, glancing at Aria. Later, when they were alone, Tom confronted Aria. "Your people didn't contact Earth for cultural exchange. You're looking for a breeding stock." Aria flinched at his bluntness. "That's not how we..." "Isn't it? Your species engineered itself into a corner. Now you need fresh genetic material to survive." "We need hope," she corrected, her voice suddenly vulnerable. "Do you know what it's like to watch your entire civilization slowly fade? To know that despite all our achievements, all our power, we cannot solve the simplest biological imperative, reproduction." Tom was surprised by her emotion. The composed, superior Aria was gone, replaced by someone frightened for her people's future. "Why not tell us the truth from the beginning?" he asked, his anger softening. Would your people have agreed to help a race that considered them inferior? She looked away. The Queen's Council is divided. Some see humans as our salvation. Others see you as a threat to our genetic purity, despite our dire situation. Tom realized the political complexity of his position. He wasn't just an exchange visitor. He was potentially the answer to an alien species' survival, whether all of them wanted to admit it or not. What neither Tom nor Arya knew was that the Queen had already made her decision, and the next phase of the Valorian plan was about to begin. Tom noticed the increased attention from Valorian scientists during his 4th month on the planet. They collected samples of his hair, skin cells, and blood under the pretense of medical examinations. He didn't resist, understanding now what was truly at stake. One evening, after another day of testing, Arya invited him to witness something few outsiders had ever seen. She led him through a series of security checkpoints into the depths of the main scientific complex. This is the Hall of Generation, she explained as massive doors slid open. The heart of our reproductive technology. The circular chamber contained hundreds of incubation pods, each monitored by dedicated systems. Only a fraction of them held developing embryos, their glow distinct from the empty units. 30 years ago, this room was full, Arya said quietly. Now we celebrate when even one new life begins successfully. An older Valorian approached them, her white robes marking her as someone of importance. The Queen's advisor brings the human to our most sacred place, she said, studying Tom with unmasked interest. I am Director Lyra of the Genetic Council. He needs to understand, Lyra, Arya replied. If we're to proceed. Tom looked between them. Proceed with what exactly? Lyra activated a holographic display showing complex DNA structures, human and Valorian genetic material. We've completed extensive simulation testing. She enlarged a section where the 2 DNA patterns merge. The compatibility is remarkable, better than anything we've seen in centuries of searching the galaxy. What does this mean in practical terms? Tom asked, though he already suspected the answer. It means, Lyra stated, that human males could potentially fertilize Valorian females, resulting in viable offspring that would introduce critical genetic diversity. Later that night, in a secure meeting chamber, the full implications became clear. Tom sat at a table with Arya, Lyra, and 5 other members of the Science Council. The Queen has authorized a controlled experiment, Lyra announced. 1 human, 1 Valorian, to test actual compatibility rather than theoretical models. The room fell silent. Then Arya spoke. I have volunteered. Tom stared at her in shock. Excuse me? Don't I get any say in this? Of course, Lyra interjected smoothly. Your participation must be voluntary. You would be compensated generously and regarded as a savior of our species if successful. And if I refuse? Then we select another candidate, Arya said, not meeting his eyes. The exchange program brought 50 humans to Valoria. Tom stood up, anger rising. So that's what this was all about. The entire cultural exchange was a breeding program. A necessary step for our survival, Lyra replied calmly. You've seen our situation. Tom looked at Arya, who still wouldn't meet his gaze. I need time to think, he said, and left the room. For the next week, Tom kept to himself, declining meetings with Arya. Instead, he spent time with other humans in the exchange program, discreetly asking if they'd experienced similar approaches. None had, though some mentioned increased medical testing. One morning, he found Arya waiting outside his quarters. May I come in? She asked, her usually confident demeanor subdued. Once inside, she didn't waste time. I owe you an explanation. Yes, the initial contact with Earth was prompted by our reproductive crisis, but the situation is more complex than Lyra explained. She revealed that Valorian society was divided into factions. The traditionalists wanted no outside interference, preferring extinction to genetic contamination. The progressives saw human DNA as their salvation, The Queen supported the progressives but needed proof of concept before making any public announcements. "Why you, specifically?" Tom asked. "You're a Queen's advisor. Surely there were other volunteers." Arya looked away. "I was chosen because of my background in genetics and because—" She hesitated. "Because they believed I could convince you." "Seduce me, you mean?" Tom's voice was hard. "Initially, yes," she admitted. "But something unexpected happened. I've come to respect you, Tom. Your perspective, your resilience, the way you question our assumptions." She finally met his eyes. "I didn't expect to find an equal in an Earth male." Tom studied her face, seeing genuine emotion there for the first time. "And now? Now I'm asking, not for my species, but for myself. Will you help me? Not as an experiment, but as a partner in something unprecedented." The proposal hung between them, fraught with personal and interplanetary implications neither could fully predict. Tom's quarters became a sanctuary for him and Arya over the following weeks. There, away from the scrutiny of both human and Valorian observers, they spoke honestly about their worlds, their beliefs, and the incredible situation they found themselves in. On Earth, relationships aren't scientific experiments. Tom explained one evening as they shared a meal. They develop naturally. Arya tilted her head curiously. "Even without genetic compatibility analysis." "That seems so random." "That's exactly the point," Tom laughed. "The randomness created the diversity your species engineered away." Their relationship progressed cautiously. The significant cultural differences created misunderstandings, but also moments of surprising connection. Arya marveled at human concepts like romantic love, which Valorians had replaced with practical pair bonding. Tom was fascinated by Valorian telepathic empathy, a trait that allowed bonded pairs to sense each other's emotions. 3 months after their first private conversation, Arya missed a scheduled meeting. Tom found her the next day looking pale, but with an inner glow he hadn't seen before. "It worked," she whispered, gripping his hands. "I'm pregnant." The news spread rapidly through the highest levels of Valorian government. The Queen herself summoned them to a private audience, her tall frame and ancient eyes examining Tom with new interest. "You have accomplished what our scientists thought impossible," she said. "A viable cross-species embryo. The first new genetic line in our population in 5 centuries." Director Lyra arrived with medical scanners, her usual cold demeanor replaced with barely contained excitement. "The embryo shows perfect cellular division. Both Valorian and human genetic markers are present, but there are no signs of rejection." The Queen turned to Arya. "How do you feel, advisor?" "Different," Arya admitted. "Stronger, somehow. The medical team says my hormone levels are more balanced than typical Valorian pregnancies." As Arya's pregnancy progressed, she became something of a celebrity among Valorian scientists. Her vital signs were stronger than any pregnant Valorian in recorded history. The embryo developed without the complications that plagued pure Valorian pregnancies. Word began to spread beyond the scientific community. Valorian females with fertility issues started requesting information about human genetic compatibility. Some traditionalists protested outside the palace, holding signs decrying genetic pollution, but they were far outnumbered by desperate Valorians hoping for a solution to their reproductive crisis. Tom found himself elevated from curiosity to valued ally. The same Valorian officials who had once mocked him now sought his opinion on matters related to human-Valorian relations. The other humans in the exchange program noticed the shift in attitude toward them as well. "They're looking at us differently," remarked Jim, another military officer in the exchange. "Like we're valuable now." "What changed, Tom?" Tom couldn't reveal the truth yet. The Queen had ordered silence until the pregnancy reached a critical milestone. But rumors were already spreading. During the 5th month of Arya's pregnancy, Tom was given unprecedented access to Valorian medical archives. He discovered that the species' reproductive issues went back further than Arya had admitted. Even before the selective breeding programs, Valorians had low fertility rates. Their evolutionary path had prioritized intelligence and longevity over reproduction. You didn't just need genetic diversity. Tom confronted Arya that evening. Your species was already struggling to reproduce efficiently before the engineering began. Arya nodded slowly, cradling her growing belly. The engineering made it worse, but yes, we evolved as a case-selected species. Few offspring, high parental investment. When our civilization advanced enough to eliminate natural selection, our reproduction became even less efficient. And humans. Your species produces offspring easily, adapts quickly. You're almost perfectly complementary to our biological weaknesses. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. For the first time, he felt movement. This child carries the strengths of both our kinds. Tom was overwhelmed by the moment. This was no longer about genetics or diplomacy or even survival. It was about a new life, an impossible bridge between two worlds. Neither of them noticed the surveillance drone outside the window, transmitting everything to both Valorian traditionalists and Earth intelligence. News of Arya's pregnancy caused unprecedented upheaval on Valoria. The Queen finally made a public announcement, declaring the human Valorian child as the hope for their species' future. Millions of Valorians celebrated, but a vocal minority saw it as the end of their genetic purity. Tom returned to his quarters one evening to find the locks disabled and warning lights flashing. Inside, he discovered signs of a hurried search. His personal communications device was missing, along with blood samples he'd set aside for his own analysis. As he turned to leave, 3 Valorian females blocked the doorway. "The human specimen," said the tallest one, her uniform bearing the insignia of a traditionalist faction. "You will come with us." Tom assessed his options. Though he was strong by human standards, even a single Valorian female outmatched him physically. "I think I'll stay here, thanks." The leader stepped forward. "Your voluntary cooperation is preferred but not required." Before they could grab him, a security alarm blared through the corridor. The Valorians hesitated, then scattered as royal guards appeared, led by Captain Mira, once Tom's most vocal critic, now his reluctant protector. "The Queen demands your presence immediately," Mira stated, not bothering to explain the attempted abduction. At the palace, Tom found chaos. Security forces rushed through hallways while officials huddled in urgent discussion. In the Queen's private chamber, he found Arya looking pale but resolute, her pregnancy now clearly visible. "The traditionalists have made their move," the Queen explained. "They've transmitted data about our experiment to certain factions on Earth. Your government now knows everything." Tom's heart sank. "How bad is it?" A communication screen activated, showing the face of General Harris, Tom's commanding officer back on Earth. His expression was thunderous. "Colonel, I'm ordering you to return to Earth immediately. This unauthorized biological experiment violates at least 15 international protocols." "Sir, with respect, it's not that simple," Tom replied. "It's exactly that simple," Harris barked. "The Valorians deceived us. They're using human DNA without consent to save their species. Some are calling it genetic harvesting." Arya stepped forward. "General, I assure you this was a consensual arrangement between myself and—" "Save it," Harris interrupted. "We're sending ships to retrieve our people. All of them. The cultural exchange is over." After the transmission ended, the Queen's advisors erupted in argument. Some demanded Tom's detention to prevent Earth from interfering with Arya's pregnancy. Others suggested offering technology exchanges to appease human authorities. "Quiet." The Queen's voice silenced the room. "We need time. Tom, you understand your people best. What will they do?" "They'll come for me and the others," he answered honestly, "and they won't be gentle if resisted." That night, Arya came to Tom's new, heavily guarded quarters. "You should go," she said softly. "Return with your people. And leave you and our child to face this alone." Tom shook his head. "Not happening. The traditionalists will not stop. They see you as a threat to everything they believe in. And now your own people view you as a traitor. Tom took her hands. I'm not abandoning you. Either of you. Before Arya could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Emergency sirens wailed as smoke filled the corridors. Royal guards rushed in, weapons drawn. Traditionalist attack, one shouted. We must move you to safety. As they hurried through the palace, Tom noticed the guards were taking them away from the secure bunkers, toward the landing platforms instead. He caught a glimpse of a uniform insignia. These weren't royal guards at all, but traditionalists in disguise. It's a trap, he yelled, pulling Arya behind a column as energy weapons fired past them. The false guards advanced, blocking all escape routes. Tom looked desperately for an advantage, finding none. Then, unexpectedly, the floor beneath the attackers liquefied, swallowing them instantly before resolidifying. Director Lyra stepped from a hidden doorway. This way, quickly. The Queen has authorized your immediate evacuation. She handed Tom a weapon. The Progressives have prepared a ship. You must leave Valoria tonight. Both of you. Leave? Where would we go? Arya asked, clutching her belly protectively. Somewhere neither Valorians nor humans will find you, Lyra replied grimly, until the child is born. After that, perhaps both our worlds will be ready to accept what you've created. The small science vessel drifted through the asteroid belt of a neutral star system, carefully hidden among the rocky debris. Inside, Tom adjusted the cloaking systems, while Arya monitored the long-range scanners for pursuit. For 3 months, they had lived as fugitives, evading both Valorian and Earth ships. Another false alarm. Arya sighed, leaning back in her chair. Her pregnancy was now in its final stage, her belly prominently rounded. But the Valorian cruiser is still patrolling the outer system. Tom nodded, checking their dwindling supplies. Director Lyra had provisioned them well, but they hadn't planned for such a prolonged isolation. We'll need to risk a supply run soon. The outpost on Darius IV might be safe. Their escape had triggered a diplomatic crisis. Earth accused Valoria of genetic experimentation on humans, while Valoria claimed Tom had voluntarily participated in a program vital to their species' survival. Both sides demanded the return of their citizens, though for very different purposes. The baby moved again, Arya said, her expression softening as she placed her hand on her stomach. Strong, like its father. Tom sat beside her, feeling the movement beneath his palm. Despite their precarious situation, these moments brought him unexpected joy. And brilliant like its mother, I hope. Their peace was shattered by a proximity alarm. A ship had entered the asteroid field, its design unfamiliar. Not Valorian or Earth, Tom muttered, scanning its configuration. Wait, it's broadcasting the Queen's private code. Cautiously, they allowed the small craft to dock. The airlock cycled open to reveal Director Lyra, accompanied by a human Tom recognized as Dr. Alan Peters, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists from the exchange program. You're a difficult pair to find, Lyra said, which was precisely the point, I suppose. Why are you here? Tom demanded, keeping himself between the visitors and Arya. And why bring him? Dr. Peters stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. I'm here as a neutral observer. Both sides have agreed to talks. Over the next hours, they explained how the situation had evolved. The birth of a human Valorian child had become the most significant xenopolitical event in history. Initial anger had given way to scientific curiosity and cautious diplomacy. The traditionalists attempted a coup against the Queen. Lyra explained. They failed. Public opinion turned against them when medical data showed how promising the hybrid genetics could be for our future. And Earth? Tom asked, looking at Peters. Divided, as usual, the scientist replied. But most nations recognize the potential benefits of cooperation with Valoria. Their technology could solve many of our problems, and our genetic diversity could save their species. As they talked, Arya suddenly gasped, clutching her stomach. The baby, she whispered. It's coming. What followed was a blur of activity. Lyra and Peters, both with medical training, transformed the ship's small medical bay for delivery. Tom stayed by Aria's side through hours of labor, her strength gradually fading as the birth progressed. "Something's wrong," Lyra finally admitted, studying the medical scanner. "The baby is positioned correctly, but Aria's body is struggling with the final stage." Peters examined the readings and nodded grimly. "The hybrid physiology is creating complications we didn't anticipate." Tom held Aria's hand tighter as her eyes found his. "Don't you dare give up," he told her fiercely. "We didn't come this far to fail now." "I need to try something unconventional," Peters said, preparing a series of injections, a hormone cocktail that might help bridge the physiological differences. The next hour was the longest of Tom's life. Aria fought with everything she had, her legendary Valorian strength pushed to its limits by something more powerful than any of them, the miracle of new life. When the cry finally came, strong and clear, the small medical bay fell silent in awe. The child, a girl, had her mother's violet eyes and her father's determined chin. Perfect in every way, a bridge between two worlds. 6 months later, Tom stood beside Aria on the observation deck of the Valorian Royal Palace. Below them, in the Grand Plaza, humans and Valorians mingled freely. Scientists from both worlds collaborated in newly established research centers. Pairs of human males and Valorian females walked together, some already showing signs of pregnancy. "The Treaty of New Beginning," Aria said, holding their daughter as she watched the historic signing ceremony on the display. "I never imagined we would come this far." The agreement established a formal alliance between Earth and Valoria, with genetic cooperation at its heart. The Valorians provided advanced technology and medical knowledge, while humans offered the genetic diversity that would save the Valorian species from extinction. "They named a day after you," Tom said, smiling at his daughter. "First Child Day. The beginning of a new era." As their child reached for the stars visible through the viewport, both parents knew that the once mocked men of Earth had not just saved an alien species, they had helped create a future neither world could have achieved alone.